Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into a topic that, well, it touches pretty much every aspect of our lives.
Mm.
How we define ethics, particularly in our professions, and how self-interest often kind of collides with the collective good.
Hmm.
We've got a fascinating stack of sources that honestly challenge some very deeply held assumptions about how we live and work.
Indeed, they do. Our materials really push us, I think, to question the very framework of what we even consider ethical. They explore historical perspectives, modern dilemmas, often with surprising clarity.
Right.
And when we connect this to the bigger picture, it asks us to reconsider the subtle ways our systems can maybe inadvertently incentivize behavior that might
You
be
see?
perfectly legal, on paper,
Uh-huh.
but certainly isn't always in the public's best interest. It raises a really important question, doesn't it? Can one truly be free in their opinions, in their actions, if their livelihood, their whole way of life depends on holding or advocating for a certain viewpoint?
That's really the core of it, isn't it? So, our mission today is to distill the powerful, sometimes frankly uncomfortable insights from all this rich material.
Yeah.
We'll explore some surprising historical takes on the tension between, making a living and living ethically, uncover what our sources provocatively call the Alan Blinder problem. We'll definitely get into that, and challenge that all too common idea that, well, everyone's doing it, so it must be okay.
Yeah.
By the end of this deep dive, hopefully you'll gain some new tools to critically assess information, understand maybe the hidden forces at play in our economic and social lives, and perhaps even see your own professional landscape in a, well, completely new light.
Hmm? Let's hope so.
Okay, let's start with a scenario that I think for many of us hits uncomfortably close to home. Imagine a lobbyist for the tobacco industry, an industry, let's be honest, widely known for products that are demonstrably harmful, even lethal. The question our sources pose is striking. How can their own family members, their parents, siblings, kids, tolerate this? How do they not, ostracize them or harass them or just avoid them at the next family barbecue?
It's the powerful question.
It is. And the insights here suggest the answer often boils down to a very simple, almost primal human need. You gotta make a living.
Hmm.
This necessity, our sources argue, often just blurs the lines between deeply held personal ethics and, well, professional requirements. It's almost as if we're all subtly acknowledging maybe that we too could find ourselves in a similar ethical bind someday, leading to this strange sort of collective tolerance.
And what's truly fascinating there is how this immediately pits ethics dictating profession against, well, profession dictating ethics. Does the job you choose, or maybe the one you just fall into, start to define your ethical boundaries?
Or is it the other way around?
Exactly. Or do your pre-existing ethical principles define what kind of work you can, in good conscience, actually take on? This tension is explicitly highlighted in the research. They ask whether any means of making money is truly acceptable.
Ooh.
Yeah, and our sources don't pull punches. They cite examples like profiting from the tobacco trade, alcohol, even pan masala, that controversial chewing product you find in South Asia.
Right.
They really push us to consider if there are certain industries where the very act of profiting from them should, just by its nature, disqualify someone from being seen as genuinely ethical. It forces us to examine the direction of that arrow. Is your profession now shaping your ethics, or are your ethics leading you to choose that profession? It's subtle, maybe, but a profoundly different way of looking at it.
And this is where the discussion takes a really unexpected turn, revealing a perspective that, well, it really made me pause. Our sources recount this captivating hypothetical debate. It's between the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates and the Roman Emperor Nero, with this very colorful character, Fat Tony, sort of interjecting his street-smart commentary.
Okay.
So Socrates is supposedly transported to our time. He's asked what would surprise him most about our modern physical environment after 25 centuries. Nero speculates, maybe, the absence of slaves. He imagines Socrates looking around, amazed at a world supposedly free of forced labor.
Yeah.
But then, Fat Tony, ever the pragmatist, just blurts out, there are still slaves around. These modern slaves, the sources suggest, are often tie wearers, even very rich ones. Nero tries to clarify, saying, but Tony, some of these guys are way richer than you, and Tony just dismisses money as numbers.
Wow. Okay, so that immediately raises a crucial question. What exactly defines a slave in this surprising modern context?
Right. It's not about money, apparently.
No, exactly. The material clarifies that for Nero and Fat Tony, it's certainly not about financial wealth or the lack of it. Instead, it's about a profound lack of self-ownership, about possessing wealth without independence.
Wealth without independence.
Yeah. And this leads directly into what our sources call the treadmill effect, that relentless, often escalating need to make more and more money just to maintain your current lifestyle or, perceived status.
Just to keep up.
Just to keep up. It's a subtle, almost insidious form of dependency, like an anti-fragile kind of greed, they call it, where individuals are tricked into believing that accumulating more wealth automatically brings independence, when paradoxically, it can do the exact opposite.
That's counterintuitive.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're told that despite humanity being never richer in the history of mankind, we've also never been more in-depth, meaning profoundly dependent on systems, on continued earnings. This is a profound observation, suggesting that true freedom isn't just about piling up wealth, but about breaking free from the hidden chains that often come with economic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Deeply ironic, isn't it? As our net worth grows, so too can our dependencies.
And this idea of constantly striving but never really being independent, it ties directly into what our sources vividly describe as the permanently tantalized class.
Oh, Tantalus.
Exactly. Think about that ancient Greek myth. Tantalus, condemned to eternal punishment, standing in a pool of water under a fruit tree, but both the water and the fruit just recede whenever he tries to reach them.
Torture.
Right. And our sources describe a modern condition where many people are subjected to this same kind of eternal punishment, constantly striving for more, reaching for goals that always seem just out of reach, never truly satisfied, never achieving genuine independence. You might feel this pressure yourself. Maybe you decide to do better by moving to a fancy, wealthy neighborhood, say Greenwich, Connecticut. But then, suddenly, you find yourself feeling like a pauper next to neighbors in multi-million-dollar mansions throwing million-dollar birthday parties.
Keeping up with the Joneses on steroids.
Totally.
Yeah.
And suddenly, you become more and more dependent on your high-paying job, especially if your neighbors are funding their lavish lifestyles with things like huge, maybe even tax-sponsored Wall Street bonuses. It's this never-ending cycle of comparison, escalating social expectations, and consequently, increased financial pressure that can leave you just perpetually thirsty for more.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, our sources highlight that the ancient Romans actually had a remarkably different approach to getting around these very social treadmill effects we're talking about.
Oh, how so?
Well, much of their social life revolved not around endless personal accumulation, but around a really sophisticated patron and client system.
Patron and client.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In this setup, the less fortunate members of society benefited directly from a patron's generosity. They might eat at their table, get direct financial help, or rely on personal influence. And crucially, this was all without formal, impersonal welfare systems or, institutionalized church charity.
It was personal.
Exactly. Everything was private, fostering direct personal responsibility. This system provided a direct, tangible link between wealth and its social obligations. It stands in sharp contrast with what our sources critically call court life, which they argue leads to a subtle kind of corruption and this constant, insecure need to prop up one's self-esteem when you move away from your local status.
Interesting.
Like provincial landowners weren't just expected to be rich, they were expected to maintain an open house, making their wealth directly accessible to their constituents. Kind of like how a respected community or maybe even a mafia don might socialize directly with their people, not just with other elites. It was a deeply localized, tangible form of social contract, where wealth came with direct, visible responsibilities.
So, okay, bringing this historical context and these provocative modern observations back, what does it all mean for the concept of professional ethics today?
Well, our sources argue quite pointedly that you cannot possibly trust someone on a treadmill.
Wow.
The implication is, if someone is constantly chasing more just to maintain their position, their opinions, particularly on matters of public good, become inherently compromised. They suggest that rapid indoctrination into a profession can make your opinions self-serving and therefore unreliable for the collective. This was actually a significant bone the Greeks had to pick with professionals back in their day, a historical skepticism that really resonates today, I think.
So this isn't a new problem?
Not at all. The Athenians, for instance, they held a deep disdain for artisans who worked for a living in dark rooms, making objects often sitting down. The philosopher Xenophon felt such crafts degraded the craftsman's body, softened his spirit, left him no time for friends or civic life. The crafts of war and farming, though, were seen as worthy of gentlemen. Why? Because they gave one a wider scope to attend to friends in cities, they were inherently less self-serving and, crucially, less prone to conflicts of interest with the common good.
Right, okay. That makes sense.
And the materials bring up a stark, very modern example from Wall Street. A managing director openly asking employees to contribute to specific political campaigns, even suggesting a payment based on a percentage of their income.
Wow. Explicitly.
Explicitly, the goal: to secure legislation that would directly protect or benefit their business. The critical insight here, according to our sources, is that participating in such an act, even if it's legal, would mean fundamentally losing the ethical eligibility to voice a political opinion for the public good.
Because your interest is tied up in it.
Exactly. Your financial interest is now inextricably linked to the outcome. This immediately draws parallels to the ancient Athenian statesman Demades. He famously condemned a man who traded in funeral goods. Demades' logic was simple. How can you trust someone whose livelihood directly profits from the sorrow and death of others? It makes us reflect on that larger uncomfortable question. Should we, by extension, condemn every professional whose success might, in some way, be tied to the misfortune or continued struggle of others?
It's a heavy question.
It is. And centuries before Adam Smith articulated his ideas on economic self-interest, thinkers like Montaigne and Seneca wrestled with this very paradox. They observed that a merchant thrives by debauchery, maybe selling luxury goods that encourage excess, a farmer by grain scarcity, a physician by illness, a soldier by war. They came remarkably close to concluding that everyone's wishes, if you really looked into people's inner thoughts, were almost invariably at someone else's expense. A profoundly cynical view, perhaps, but perceptive in some ways.
Almost like zero sum.
Almost. However, our sources argue that despite their remarkable foresight on self-interest driving economic growth and their understanding that economic life doesn't necessarily need altruistic motives, they missed a central, crucial point. They missed a nuance, a distinction that makes all the difference.
And what they missed, our sources emphatically point out, was the crucial concept of skin in the game and the equally vital agency problem.
Ah, yes. Skin in the game.
Right. It's not that making a living in a profession is inherently bad, or that simply having a personal interest automatically disqualifies someone. The critical point is that such a person becomes automatically suspect when dealing with public affairs if their personal interest isn't truly aligned with or directly impacted by the collective outcome.
It's about shared risk.
Exactly. The core idea isn't to condemn professions wholesale, but to draw a very clear, bright line when individuals step into the realm of public affairs, especially when a clear conflict of interest exists because their skin isn't in the game alongside the collective. It's about shared risk and shared reward, or in this case, maybe more importantly, shared downside.
This leads us to a deeply philosophical yet highly practical question.
Yeah.
What truly defines a free man in this context? How do we know who is truly independent?
Yeah, good question.
Our sources provide some fascinating historical definitions. Aristotle, for instance, considered someone free with his opinions as a side effect of being free with his time, implying that leisure, not labor, was the foundation of independent thought.
Okay, time equals freedom.
For Aristotle, yes. Later, the Austrian statesman Metternich humorously, if rather elitely, quipped that humanity started at the rank of baron, suggesting freedom was tied to social status.
Right.
And the English had the idea of the idle freeman, who valued not deriving identity from work, viewing labor as sort of optional, like a hobby.
Interesting variation.
But then we have our horizontal friend, Fat Tony again, who offers a definition that just cuts through all of this. For him, it's about raw personal courage and fundamental self-ownership, someone who cannot be squeezed into doing something he would otherwise never do.
Cannot be squeezed. I like that.
It's a significant leap, isn't it? From time or social rank to the profound metric of courage as the ultimate determinant of freedom. This is a very specific, almost democratic and profoundly sophisticated redefinition of what it means to be truly free. A philosophical leap, they say, from ancient Athens to the streets of Brooklyn.
Wow, okay.
And finally, on this powerful theme of personal accountability, our sources delve into the concept of shame as a penalty for ethical violations.
Shame as a tool.
Exactly. In ancient city-states, banishment or ostracism was an absolutely severe punishment. Being uprooted from your community was seen as a horrible calamity. Shame fulfilled its duty as a powerful disciplinarian, forcing compliance, upholding social norms.
Made sense in a small community.
Right. But in our modern mega-nation states, where face-to-face interaction is diluted and social roots are less deep, shame often loses its power. If you can just move to another city or blend into a huge population, the sting of public disapproval diminishes significantly.
So what's the solution?
Well, this leads to a simple but quite drastic solution proposed in our sources to address this erosion of accountability. Anyone in public service should be capped in their commercial earnings after their tenure. They shouldn't be allowed to earn more than the highest paid civil servant.
Seriously, a cap after leaving office.
That's the proposal. The idea is to prevent public office from becoming just a credential building, temporary accommodation, a stepping stone before moving on to highly lucrative private sector jobs, like those offering, say, $5 million a year sinecures, which looks suspiciously like a payoff for their time in public office.
Right, the revolving door.
Exactly. This cap would, the sources suggest, attract more priestly people into public service individuals motivated by genuine civic duty rather than future financial gain.
That would be a change. Okay, now let's delve into a specific and truly eye-opening example, what our sources provocatively call the Ellen Blinder problem.
Ah, yes, blinder.
This story involves a former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank attempting to sell a peculiar investment product that, in essence, aims at legally hoodwinking taxpayers. You are absolutely going to want to hear the details of this one.
It's quite something.
Our sources describe a private coffee conversation. The main topic was supposed to be a serious discussion about saving the world from moral hazard, a core concept in financial stability.
Very important stuff.
Very. And yet, right in the middle of this weighty discussion, Blinder apparently interrupted to pitch this very specific product, laying bare the inherent conflict right there.
And what's truly fascinating and frankly deeply troubling, here is the ingenious yet ethically dubious mechanism behind this product.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so it allowed a high net worth individual to deposit virtually unlimited funds. Blinder's company would then cleverly break these enormous sums into smaller accounts, each falling just within the government's insurance limit, the FDIC limit.
Uh-huh.
And then they'd spread them across dozens, maybe even hundreds of different banks. From the perspective of the wealthy individual, it looked like one single massive account, but it was structured so that every single penny was fully insured by the government.
So they bypassed the insurance cap.
Completely. Essentially, it allowed the super rich to bypass the limits, thereby effectively, as the source puts it, scamming taxpayers by getting free government-sponsored insurance for amounts far exceeding what ordinary citizens could ever access.
Wow.
And when the direct question, isn't that unethical, was, as our sources say, blurted out.
What was the response?
Immediate. It is perfectly legal. Followed by an even more incriminating remark, we have plenty of former regulation on this staff.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, implying not only that legality equals ethics, but that having former regulators on staff gives you an edge, a privileged insight into how to exploit the system over regular citizens. It's a textbook model, really, of leveraging public office and expertise to legally profit from the public.
So what does this mean for us, the citizens who rely on these systems? I mean, the implications seem huge.
They are. Our sources argue that former regulators and public officials, people originally hired to represent our best interests, to maintain the integrity of financial systems, can then just turn around and use their required expertise, their insider knowledge, their contacts, to profit handsomely from glitches in the system when they join private employment or prestigious law firms.
The regulator's edge.
Precisely. And you can clearly see how the more complex the regulation, the more bureaucratic the whole network involved, the more this regulator's edge doesn't just grow, it becomes what our sources call a convex function of the differential knowledge.
Okay, unpack convex function for us.
Right, sounds like math. But think of something that gets disproportionately more powerful or valuable the more you add to it, like a tiny bit of leverage in finance leading to massive returns or losses.
Got it.
Here it means the more intricate and convoluted the rules become, the exponentially greater the advantage for those with inside knowledge. It's not just a little edge, it's a colossal runaway franchise, often at the expense of everyone else. Took the author of our source a couple of years, they say, to fully grasp the profound and disturbing implications of this.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, does it get worse?
Unfortunately, yes. Our sources highlight that Ellen Blinder, while privately promoting this ethically dubious product offering unlimited government insurance to the ultra-rich, publicly opposed raising the very same government's insurance limit for ordinary individuals.
We're kidding.
Not kidding. His public argument was that the general public shouldn't have the unlimited insurance that his private clients were, in essence, benefiting from. This raises a deeply troubling question about the true motivations behind public stances, doesn't it? The sheer hypocrisy when personal self-interest is subtly, or maybe not so subtly, at play behind a veneer of public concern.
That's just wow.
And this example illuminates several critical points about our whole regulatory and ethical landscape. First, the more complicated the regulation becomes, the more prone it is to arbitrages by the insider.
Right, more loopholes.
Exactly.
Right.
Our sources suggest that 2,300 pages of complex, convoluted regulation could often be replaced by something as simple and profound as Hammurabi's rule, ancient, clear, concise.
Less is more.
Right. This implies that overly complex rules often serve not as safeguards for the public, but as a goldmine for former regulators who, in this view, effectively become enemies of a less is more rule. Their inherent incentive is often to create more complex regulations, thereby solidifying their own unique value as the only ones who can navigate the labyrinth they helped create.
Okay, that's point one.
Second, the critical difference between the letter and spirit of regulation becomes almost impossible to detect in such complex systems. It's far easier to exploit murky, non-linear environments with countless variables than simple linear ones with clear rules. The gap between what's technically legal and what's truly ethical becomes vast and easily exploited, often by those who helped design the system.
Makes sense.
Third, and perhaps most subtly insidious, our sources contend that while maybe some countries might see explicit overt bribes, the United States often operates on a system of implicit, never-mentioned promises. This unspoken agreement suggests that if you're a regulator seen favorably by the industry, there's a strong likelihood of going to work for a bank at a later date with a sinecure offering, say, $5 million a year.
The payoff.
Exactly. And the regulations designed to prevent such activities are also conveniently, easily sidestepped. It creates this silent, self-serving pact that maintains the status quo.
What's truly frustrating, though, as the sources point out, is the general public's reaction to this whole Alan Blinder problem.
Oh, is it?
Instead of outrage, people often found it natural that a former official would try to make money from their position. They'd shrug it off. Don't you like to make money?
Oh, dear.
Yeah. This reaction points to a much deeper issue, what our sources term ethical optionality, where people fit their beliefs into action rather than fit their action into belief.
Explain that a bit more.
It's like cherry picking or retroactively constructing an ethical rule after you've already done something purely to defend a narrative or justify your behavior rather than establishing clear ethical principles beforehand and acting according to them. You argue after the fact.
Ah, fitting the story to the facts, not the actions to the principles.
Precisely. And for a long time, apparently, the very art of arguing was about this masterfully fitting narratives after the fact, regardless of the underlying principles.
This raises a vital question for all of us then. How do we, as informed citizens, actually detect such fraudulent opinions in the constant barrage of information we face?
Good question. Is there a way?
Our sources offer a powerful and surprisingly simple heuristic. They define fraudulent opinions as those with vested interest generalized to public good.
Okay. Vested interests generalized.
Think of it this way. A hairdresser might sincerely recommend haircuts for health. Sounds good for you, right? But it also directly benefits their business. Or consider a gun lobbyist claiming gun ownership is universally good for America. That's certainly a viewpoint, but also directly benefits their industry and personal livelihood. The heuristic is elegantly simple. Does the fellow have anything to gain from his argument?
Just ask that one question.
Just ask that. If the answer is yes, then, according to our sources, their credibility automatically diminishes, and their opinion should be treated with extreme skepticism.
Okay.
Our sources illustrate this vividly with a story from Cyprus. It involved a petrochemical engineering professor.
Okay.
This professor vehemently argued against climate activists, asserting there was no evidence that fossil fuel causes harm to the planet. He was very animated, apparently, arguing for an absence of evidence rather than evidence of absence. A subtle but critical logical point.
Right.
However, when the host of our sources, who was sitting serendipitously next to him, just casually asked about his background,
What did they find?
it turned out he was deep into oil companies as an advisor, an investor, and a consultant.
Ah, there it is.
Boom. Immediately, the credibility of his scientific argument was, for our source, utterly lost. This, once again, is the essence of skin in the game.
Ties it all together.
It does. If someone have an opinion, say, that the banking system is fragile and should collapse, Our sources want that person to be invested in it, so he's harmed if the audience or the opinion are harmed.
Yeah.
It shows they're not just an empty suit, a detached critic.
Right. They share the risk.
Exactly. But for general statements about collective welfare where the speaker is claiming something is good for everyone, our sources argue that the absence of investment is what is required via negativa.
Via negativa, meaning?
Meaning you prove it by the negative. This is what they call the inverse Allen Blinder problem. It means we should give more weight to opinions when they present the opposite of a conflict of interest.
Give me an example.
Okay, think of a pharmacist who, despite profiting from selling diabetes drugs, advocates for a healthy diet, maybe even starvation, as a more effective treatment over medication. That's a person whose opinion, because it goes directly against their financial gain, carries immense ethical weight. It's about proving conviction through potential personal sacrifice.
Proving it by potentially losing something. Okay, that's powerful. This profound insight about detecting fraudulent opinions, it brings us to a crucial point about the tyranny of the collective, especially within the realm of knowledge and research.
Yeah, this part is concerning.
Our sources dive headfirst into the problems associated with big data, and they argue a highly counterintuitive point that more data means more information, perhaps, but it also means more false information.
Sounds wrong, doesn't it? More data, more truth.
Exactly, especially with the current obsession with data. But they highlight a stark reality. Fewer and fewer papers replicate, particularly in fields like psychology and economics. You can hardly trust many statistically oriented sciences anymore, especially when researchers are under immense pressure to publish, to find something significant, whether it's true or not.
And what's truly fascinating and deeply disturbing here is the precise explanation for this phenomenon.
What is it?
Researchers are under intense pressure, publish or perish, right, for their careers, for tenure, for grants. This often leads to what are called spurious correlations patterns that pop up in the data purely by chance, looking significant but meaning nothing.
Just noise.
Exactly. A massive increase in noise over any true signal. Our sources call this the epiphenomenon. Imagine you're a detective solving a crime. If you're looking at history purely from a library vantage point, just sifting through tons of old data after the fact, you're bound to find many more false relationships, more misleading clues than someone who was actually there, seeing matters in the making in real life, experiencing the chaos. Essentially, in this system, falsity goes faster than information. Misleading conclusions spread faster than genuine discoveries.
And the researcher benefits.
The researcher who finds that spurious correlation gets the career bump, while the truth itself bears the downside. The more variables you have in big data, the more likely you are to stumble upon these statistically significant but ultimately meaningless correlations.
And this problem of compromised integrity, it extends deep into academia, into institutional structures, leading to what our sources boldly label a scientific swindle.
A strong term.
Very. They highlight this profoundly human thing, how people who would individually find something completely silly or illogical or even ethically dodgy will readily engage in it in groups, driven almost entirely by that weak but pervasive argument, because everyone is doing it. This is a profound critique of how collective behavior, groupthink, conformity pressure can utterly undermine scientific integrity and intellectual honesty.
The everyone's doing it excuse.
Right. And the best argument against it isn't just that it's trivial, it's that it represents a profound systemic flaw in organized knowledge itself.
Indeed. Our sources recount these profoundly uncomfortable conversations with doctoral students. They privately admit they believe in the fat tail concept in risk management, acknowledging the higher probability of extreme, rare events than conventional models suggest.
Right, black swans.
Exactly. They express deep skepticism of current, widely taught risk management methods. Yet they feel they can't openly pursue these ideas in their research or teaching because, quote, it would not help them get an academic job.
Wow. They know it's wrong but can't say it.
Pretty much. Another student bluntly explained his primary goal was to get a job at a good university, largely so he can become a lucrative expert witness in legal cases. He understood his innovative ideas on robust risk management, which challenged the standard, flawed textbooks, simply wouldn't be bought by the established system because everyone else was using those same empirically questionable methods.
So it raises this incredibly uncomfortable question.
It does. Are professors, within these academic structures, truly fulfilling their civic duty by teaching empirically and mathematically invalid methods? Or are they just helping students get jobs at the expense of society, perpetuating a known intellectual fraud? If it's the latter, then fields like economics and business schools, in particular, face severe ethical problems right at their foundation.
That's a damning assessment.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, our sources make a very bold, unsettling declaration that economics hasn't collapsed yet in spite of obvious nonsense in it and scientifically proven nonsense.
How is that possible?
They argue that the professors teaching these flawed models, which later contribute to financial systems blowing up and causing massive societal damage, are remarkably not penalized. They don't lose their jobs, their reputations often stay intact, and the cycle just continues.
No accountability.
Exactly. According to our sources, it perpetuates a circular system in which everyone knows that the material is wrong, but nobody is free or has enough courage to do anything about it. It's a true scientific swindle, where academic departments feel compelled to teach students something to get jobs, even if that something is, fundamentally, little more than snake oil. The system is designed for self-preservation, not the pursuit of unvarnished truth.
So, okay, what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to navigate this world saturated with information, opinions, expert pronouncements?
There's a powerful, almost liberating thought here from the sources.
What is it?
Science is precisely about the arguments standing on their own legs. Something that has been proven to be wrong empirically or mathematically is plain wrong, full stop. It doesn't matter whether 100 experts or a $3 trillion consensus disagree with the statement.
The truth is the truth.
Right. The mere reliance on other people's backing, the appeal to authority or popular consensus, indicates a fundamental weakness in the argument itself. Or, as our sources provocatively put it, the collective that comprised the other is a wimp.
There's just no place in true scientific inquiry for the argument, well, other people think so, therefore it must be true.
So stand on the argument itself.
Exactly. And the good news, and it is genuinely good news as our sources convey, is that a single person with courage can bring down a collective composed of wimps.
One person can make a difference. They really can. They point to ancient scripture, which was quite aware of the problem of the diffusion of responsibility, that idea that individuals are less likely to act when others are present. And importantly, Scripture made it a sin to follow the crowd in doing evil, as well as to give false testimony in order to confirm the multitude.
Don't follow the crowd into evil.
That ancient wisdom powerfully encourages individual responsibility, critical thinking, even when it means going against the prevailing tide, enduring smear campaigns, or facing harassment. It's about having the conviction to stand alone for what is true and right.
Okay. As we wrap up this deep dive, our sources bring it all together with a truly powerful and, I think, unifying concept: anti-fragility.
The core idea.
Right. They suggest that all the real ideas can be distilled down to a central issue, a core principle underlying many seemingly disparate things. Much like the Golden Rule simplifies vast religious law, don't do unto others what you don't want them to do, the central argument here is that everything gains or loses from volatility.
Volatility, like randomness, shocks, stress.
Exactly. And conversely, fragility is precisely what loses from volatility. Think of a delicate glass on a table. It's short volatility. It breaks when exposed to shocks. Anti-fragility, then, is about things that don't just resist shocks, but actually get stronger from them. It's not just a summary. It's described as a generative principle for understanding the world.
And what's truly fascinating here is how this concept totally redefines our understanding of disorder.
How so?
Our sources propose that true education, the genuine formation of character, personality, acquisition of true knowledge, actually likes disorder. It thrives on challenges, mistakes, unexpected events.
Interesting.
In contrast, label-driven education, the kind focused on certifications, rigid curricula, it abhors disorder. It seeks predictability above all else. Innovation itself, that spark of new creation, is inherently something that gains from unnecessary uncertainty.
Like evolution.
Precisely. Think about ancestral hunters constantly adapting to unpredictable environments. They were long disorder, gaining from variability. Compare that to Epimetheus, the mythical guy who regretted his hasty choices. He represents being short disorder, suffering from the unexpected. This framework lets us detect what truly thrives on variability through what they call convexity and acceleration in outcomes.
So what does this all mean for you, for how you perceive the world and your place in it?
Well, our sources suggest we can separate people and equality of their experience based on exposure to disorder and appetite for that.
Can you give some examples?
Sure, they give vivid ones. Spartan hoplites and contra bloggers, one thriving in physical hardship, the other in a carefully curated digital space. Or adventurous contra copy editors, those seeking the unknown versus those perfecting the known. Or even ancient Phoenician traders, contra-Latin grammarians. One group thriving on high-risk, high-reward sea ventures, the other meticulously cataloging language.
So it's about how we react to stress and uncertainty.
Exactly. It's about recognizing how different things, different people, react to stress, chaos, uncertainty. Understanding that everything nonlinear is either convex or concave, meaning it either likes or hates volatility up to a certain point.
Okay, this raises a crucial question that brings us full circle. How does this concept of anti-fragility, this understanding of volatility, how does it connect back to ethics?
Right, the ethical dimension. Our sources state a profound conclusion. Ethics is largely about stolen convexities and optionality.
Okay, stolen convexities and optionality. That sounds technical. Break it down for us.
Let's try. It means understanding who benefits disproportionately from complexity, from hidden risks, from the unpredictable nature of systems, often, crucially, at someone else's expense.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Yeah.
Imagine a financial product promising high returns, but it subtly hides a tiny, complex clause that transfers all the risk of a market downturn directly to you, the consumer, while the person selling it gets a guaranteed fee regardless of the outcome.
They get the upside, I get the downside.
Exactly. They've effectively stolen your convexity. They've taken your potential upside while leaving you with all the downside risk. The Alan Blinder scenario we talked about.
Yeah.
Textbook example of such stolen optionality. He found a legal loophole that shifted financial risk from wealthy clients onto the taxpayer, effectively profiting from a system's flaws without sharing in any of the potential downside himself. That's the core of it.
Taking the options without the risk.
Precisely. More technically, we might never know the precise value of something complex, but we can control our exposure to it. And ethics, in this view, is fundamentally about controlling that exposure to ensure fairness, to prevent one party from benefiting from complexity at another's expense.
And here's a final, truly profound thought from our sources that seems to synthesize so much of what we've discussed.
What is it?
The best way to verify you are alive is by checking if you like variations.
If you like variations.
Yeah. It's not about seeking constant comfort, but about embracing the full spectrum of experience. The ups and downs, the uncertainties. Remember what they tell us. Food would not have a taste if it weren't for hunger. Results are meaningless without effort, joy without sadness, convictions without uncertainty. It's the contrast, the volatility, that gives life its flavor and meaning.
So true.
So what does this all mean for living an ethical life? Our sources conclude, quite simply, an ethical life isn't so when stripped of personal risks. It's about putting your own skin in the game authentically.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of this entire deep dive, it really challenges our comfort with just saying, I am ethical, or, taking a class in ethics.
It's not a checklist.
No. Our sources argue that true ethics isn't about rigid prescriptive rules or declarations. Instead, it's about this via negativa, focusing on what not to do, about removing optionality and reducing diffusivity, meaning, simply put, removing the ability to profit from others' expense without sharing the downside, eliminating the subtle ways you can benefit from complexity and risk without being exposed to that risk yourself. It's about a simple, actionable approach. Put your skin in the game for the collective good, and embrace the unpredictable, messy, truly anti-fragile nature of authentic living, where the real charm often comes from our very inability to fully understand or control the world. It's about seeking true symmetry in outcomes.
Wow. This deep dive has truly, I think, challenged our understanding of what it means to be ethical in this complex, interconnected world we live in.
Definitely.
We've seen how that fundamental human need to just make a living can clash profoundly with our core values, how something legal doesn't always equate to something truly ethical, and how collective pressures can lead to what our sources controversially call a scientific swindle. But crucially, we've also seen the incredible power of individual courage and the profound wisdom of connecting our actions with real-world consequences, understanding that anti-fragility means not just enduring disorder, but actually gaining from it.
What truly stands out from this discussion, for me, is that profound, recurring emphasis on skin in the game and personal accountability.
It keeps coming back.
It really does. It's about diligently scrutinizing the true incentives behind opinions and actions, especially when they touch on the collective good. And that idea that ethics is largely about stolen convexities and optionality, it provides an incredibly powerful and insightful lens to view financial and public systems. It instantly reveals how some individuals or entities might benefit enormously from complexity, while others shoulder the overwhelming burden of risk, without sharing in any of the potential benefit. It's all about seeking that vital symmetry in outcomes.
Indeed. And as we leave you with a final concise thought from our sources, every sentence in the book was a derivation, an application, or an interpretation of short maxim. The essence of it all, the guiding principle, might just be that everything gains or loses from volatility.
Simple, yet profound.
So ask yourself, in your own life and in the vast ocean of information you consume, are you embracing the variations? Are you taking personal risks? Are you ensuring your skin is in the game when it comes to the collective good? What surprising insights might you uncover when you apply this powerful lens to your own world and maybe genuinely check if you like variations to truly verify you are alive?